All right, Jennifer, whenever you're ready.
Okay, we're broadcasting.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first town hall meeting of the Costa Mesa Housing Element Update. My name is Jennifer Lee. I'm the Acting Director of Economic and Development Services here at the city. I'm happy to kick off our meeting tonight with a brief introduction. First, I want to introduce our city staff and our consultant team who will be working on this project. First, Minu Ashabi is our principal planner at the city, and she's worked for Costa Mesa for over 15 years. Minu is the lead staff member on this project, so please get to know her and feel free to reach out to her and ask her any questions or provide any feedback that you may have. Justin Arios is our assistant planner, and he's also working on this project and is here this evening. We have Nick Chen with Kimley Horn, who is our consultant project manager, and you'll be hearing from Nick a little later this evening. And lastly, we have Dave Barquist, who is our consultant principal, and who is also here and assisting the city with this project. The housing element is one of the chapters of the city's general plan, and it outlines the city's big picture housing policy. Updating the housing element is required by the state every 8 years. We're just starting out on this important effort, and we will be working together on this for the next 9 months. So for the next several months, there will be a variety of ways for you to participate and to provide feedback, and we will be going over those opportunities for participation later in the meeting. This presentation will be in English. We also have a 7:30 p.m. session that will be presented in Spanish. With that, I would like to turn it over to Nick Chen with Kimley Horn to give a brief overview and presentation of what the housing element update is all about. And after, we will open it up for questions. Also, for your neighbors and colleagues who may not have been able to make it to tonight's meeting, we will be recording the meeting, and the presentation as well as the recorded meeting will be posted on the city's website. With that, Nick, please take it over.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer mentioned, my name is Nick Chen with Kimley Horn, and I'll be walking through a brief presentation tonight that goes into why the city updates the housing element and what's involved with that element update. So first off, we're all, I think, now used to, but I know realize a few people may not be familiar with Zoom. So we wanted to put a slide on here just real quickly to kind of show what your screen may look like. Yours may look a little bit different, but there's a few ways that we can participate tonight as viewers and ask questions and make comments. So in the blue circles, you'll see a few different highlighted areas. The first is the participant slide. If you click on the participant slide, you'll bring up the window and you can use the raise hand feature. If you raise your hand, that will allow you to, and we'll go one by one and allow each speaker to speak and ask a question or make a comment. The second is the Q&A function that you can see right next to participants. If you click on that, you'll be able to make a written comment. All written comments will go into a database, and the city will respond to each one and provide that on the website following the workshop. So I just want to do a quick test and make sure we have it. If you are on the line right now, could you please go ahead and click the raise hand function? All right. Wow, that jumped up pretty quickly. Great. So it looks like we have a lot of folks working. Please unclick raise hand for the moment, just so you don't get selected. If at any point throughout the presentation you'd like to make a comment, go ahead and click that raise hand and leave it up. And like I said, at the end of the presentation, we'll have time for that discussion. If you're calling in, by the way, you can click *9. That's the same as raising your hand. And you can click *6 to unmute yourself once your name is called. So a few things that I mentioned. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Honestly, an hour and a half of anyone's time at this time period is a huge endeavor to give to us, and we really appreciate it. And wanted to let you know that we are appreciative, and your responses will definitely be a huge part of the housing element update process. I've already gone over, but I'll go over it again real quickly. For verbal questions, please use the raise hand function. For written questions to be responded to after the workshop, please use the question and answer function. With that, I'll just say we need your input. This process works best when we get input from the community. And with that, we'd like to lay out a few guidelines. First of all, being respectful of the other speakers and the ideas and thoughts that they have to share. Please listen for understanding and share your ideas with room for others. And most importantly, have fun. We want to have fun during this development process. It is very important to the city. And we want to make sure we devote a good amount of time and effort and fun to it. So this presentation is being recorded, as Jennifer mentioned, and will be available on the city's website shown here. With that, let's go ahead and get into the presentation. We're going to have a brief overview of the background of the city of Costa Mesa, a few population and housing statistics. We'll talk about what a housing element is and why it's updated. We're going to look at the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, often referred to as RHNA, one of our many planner acronyms, and then the update process, opportunities for outreach and engagement, and lastly, end with our community conversation. So, Costa Mesa at a glance. As you'll see here, we're going to go through a couple slides of just overview statistics. The first is population. These are all projections based on census data and the American Community Survey and a few other sources. So as you can see, Costa Mesa's population is anticipated or projected to continue to grow to about 2035 when it's then projected to level off a bit until 2040. On the right, you'll see a chart showing race and ethnicity within the Costa Mesa community. 72% of residents identify as white, while 36% of residents are of Hispanic Latino ethnicity, which may be of any race. Households in the Costa Mesa community are 40% married coupled households and 37% non-family households. This may be people living with roommates or living alone or renting. Those other different populations. You'll see another 15% are a single head of household, whether that be a female head or male head of household with no spouse present. And one interesting statistic on the right side is the Costa Mesa households are 60% renter households and 40% homeowner households. It's reflected in this next slide, showing that 50% of the housing in Costa Mesa is multifamily, which we typically associate with renter. Not always, but typically. You'll see that 38% is also single family detached, which again, we typically associate with home ownership, but not always. As you'll see on this chart on the right, most of the housing within Costa Mesa that's there today was built between 1950 and 1989, with housing production slowing after that. So what is a housing element? Well, it's a great question. Housing element is one of the required elements of the City of Costa Mesa's general plan. The general plan is the overarching guiding long-range policy document for the city. And the housing element is kind of unique because it's the only element that is required to be reviewed and certified by the State Department of Housing and Community Development, often referred to as HCD. The housing element itself contains a number of different components that we'll go through a little bit later, but primarily there are broad level housing goals that show how the city will meet its housing needs or projected housing needs going forward, and the policies, programs, and objectives the city will undertake to be able to meet those goals. It also identifies available sites within the city to accommodate that regional housing needs assessment that I mentioned earlier. We'll go into a little bit more detail about this later, but it's important to point out right now that while the city is required to identify sites to accommodate this need, the city is not required to build these housing units themselves, but rather identify sites that allow the market to then build it over the next 8 years. So why are housing elements updated? Well, just like many things, there are population trends, market trends, and even housing trends that affect the housing element and require it to be updated every 8 years, which is the state mandated cycle. Currently, we are in the 2013 to 2021 housing element cycle, often known as the 5th cycle. And what we're planning for now is the 2021 to 2029 housing element cycle, referred to as the 6th cycle. So what's important about updating the housing element? One, as I mentioned earlier, engaging the community in the planning process by making sure that the community's voice is heard as we plan for the future of housing in Costa Mesa. Next, it demonstrates that Costa Mesa is able to meet its projected housing need. Again, this just shows that Costa Mesa has the ability via land or the current zoning to accommodate future housing need. And this is really important because the housing need is not just any units, it's split up by income categories that we'll review a little bit later. And lastly, it was required that Costa Mesa stay current with the state laws that are continuing to change almost daily, it seems like. So with that, in order to do that and stay current with that, you're required to have what's called a certified housing element. I mentioned earlier that the State Department of Housing and Community Development, or HCD, reviews each housing element during this housing element update process. When they do that, the city will submit a draft document to HCD for review. And after discussion and review, the city will receive a substantial compliance letter, which says that the city has substantially met the requirements of the state in order to plan for future housing. This is really important that the city receive this because it keeps the city available and accessible to a lot of state funding and grants that are important to help the city. It also shows that the city is able to meet its current and future growth needs. So a few components of the housing element, and this is high level, and we'll continue to dig into these as we keep going throughout the different outreach efforts and continuing on into the next couple months. The first, as I mentioned, and what kind of mimics what we went over first, was a population and housing profile. This takes an in-depth look at the city of Costa Mesa and builds a base foundation that we can then use to build policy that's effective and works for the city of Costa Mesa. Next is a look at housing constraints, and these are constraints to the potential development of housing. And we also look at resources that are available to try and alleviate or remove some of those constraints. Like any good document, especially when you're doing an update, we review the current document and the current policies and programs to see what worked in the 5th cycle, what maybe needs a little bit of retooling, and then what's new that is required for new state law. We also, as I mentioned, identify sites that are available to meet the city's regional housing needs assessment, which I'll talk about next. And then lastly, we develop programs, policies, all centered around different types of housing and develop to meet different housing needs within the community and address different issues. That's a big part of the outreach process, is identifying some of those issues that we want to take a look at and address within the housing element document. So RHNA, or the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, I've mentioned it a few times now, but I want to go into a little bit about what the process is. So last year, the state determined an overall need based on methodology and a future projection for the number of housing needs that the state would need, the state of California would need over the next 8 years. From here, those were divided up into the different regions, and those regions were able to allocate those units based on a fair share allocation to each city and even the unincorporated county parts of each region. These are based on future growth in population, employment, and housing, and the projected growth that's anticipated. So as I mentioned, the process starts with the Department of Housing and Community Development. They determine the state's overall housing need. For Costa Mesa, it then goes to what's called the Southern California Association of Governments, or SCAG, which developed a methodology to determine a fair share distribution. Costa Mesa received 11,733 units to plan for within the next 8-year cycle. Now, this is not just any housing, as I mentioned. This is actually broken down on the table you see on the screen into 4 different income categories. These categories are very low, low, moderate, and above moderate. You can see in the second column there are percentages of AMI. What that is the 2020 area median income for the County of Orange. This is based off a hypothetical family of 4 and is 103,000 for the year 2020. In the next column, you can see the income categories that qualify for housing in these ranges. And then lastly, you see the number of units per income category that the city is required to plan for. Roughly 60 of these units are in the moderate and above moderate need, while the remaining fall into the lower income housing needs. So what's next for the update process and outreach? As I mentioned, there's going to be a comprehensive community outreach process. This is day 1 in terms of the outreach process. This town hall meeting is our kickoff. This is to get everybody on board, excited about the housing element and eager to get involved. there will be a number of other workshops, some more related to specific topics, some related to specific areas such as districts. And so there will be a lot of opportunity to provide comments and feedback. As I mentioned, we will currently review the demographic conditions within the city, and then we'll from there analyze using a number of different sources the sites available within the city. Lastly, we'll develop the goals, policies, programs, and objectives to meet Costa Mesa's overall need and plan for the future of housing. When all that's said and done, we will have public hearings where Planning Commission will have the opportunity to make a recommendation, and City Council to certify and to locally adopt, the city's housing element. This is actually required by state to be done by October 15th, 2021. So you can see we have quite the task on our hands before then. Opportunities for engagement. This is probably one of the more important slides because it shows the different upcoming opportunities that we have coming up. So as I mentioned, if you look on the left of the screen, you can see that we're at Town Hall number 1. As Jennifer mentioned, we have this Town Hall meeting, and we also have one following this at 7:30 that will be in Spanish. Everyone on the call is welcome to join that one as well. We'll be covering the same information, but there may be different speakers who have different ideas. It will be fun to hear. So as we continue to go on, immediately after this, available on the city's website tomorrow, we will be launching a community survey, both in English and in Spanish. We would really love if everybody on the call could not only participate in the survey and provide your ideas, but also share it with your friends. It's available on the city's website. And it's really the easiest, most convenient way for folks who aren't able to make the meeting to be able to give their thoughts. The questions should take around 10 minutes. And again, we really appreciate your time if you're able to take that. From here, as I mentioned, we'll go into a number of different meetings, such as district-specific meetings, subject matter expert meetings, targeted focus groups, and again, study sessions with City Council. There will be another update process or housing element outreach process in early spring of 2021. Which does another whole round and is focused around the public review draft of the document. A lot of times, community members like to see a tangible draft document that they can review, and until we have that, it's a little hard to get a picture. So that document will be available then, and we'll have another round of outreach to go through that document, what it means, what the analysis turned out, and get your feedback on it as well. So how can you engage? As I just mentioned, there's a number of different processes. Currently, attending workshops and participating in surveys are the primary way. But there's also study sessions. There will be a review of the public draft. Information is consistently being updated on the city's housing element website. Many of you probably went to that website to be able to access this meeting tonight. And as you went through, you'll notice that as you go through there, we'll continue to update the schedules that are located there and make sure that any meetings are noticed well beforehand. So lastly, we want your input. And this is the survey that I mentioned earlier. This survey has been put together and crafted to get input on large housing ideas and the vision of the community, which helps us to then feed into those policies and programs and help to identify areas that the programs should try and accomplish as we go through. It also helps us look at regional different areas within the community to potentially locate available sites, as we discussed. So if you go onto the city's housing element website, you can click Take Survey to begin. You will be greeted with a screen that looks like the one you see now. There are 5 total slides, each with different questions on them. So please click Begin Survey, read all of the prompts carefully, and respond and give your thoughtful input. When you get to the final slide, please make sure to click Submit Final Questions to make sure that your questions are input into the database. The city really wants to gather as much feedback as possible, and this is a great tool to be able to do that. So please go take 10 minutes and participate in this survey. We really appreciate it. So with that, we're going to launch into our community conversation. We want to make sure we gave enough time to answer questions, take comments, whatever you may have. So as I mentioned earlier, we want to go ahead and either raise your hand for verbal questions or provide questions in writing via the question and answer. We are going to go as long as we get questions, and we're going to stop around 7:15 just so we can prep and prepare and launch the Spanish presentation as well. But if you have additional questions beyond that, we are, as I mentioned, in December, going to have district-specific meetings where we'll do deeper dives into each district, and we really welcome you to participate in those as well. We'll put contact information up right after this community conversation to where you can contact Manu or anyone on the project team through that email address, and we'll be able to respond to you as quickly as we can. So with that, Brenda, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can begin to call the names of folks who have raised their hands, and we'll respond to questions.
Thank you very much. So again, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. And if you're on the phone, press *9 to raise your hand. And then when I call your name or number, we'll allow you to speak. So we have one person so far that has raised their hand, and that is Kaylee Smith. And so I will allow you to speak if you will unmute yourself.
Hello, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Kaylee. I am a homeowner in Costa Mesa, as well as someone who sold several of your new home communities in the area several years ago. So my big comment tonight would just be that based on the current requirements for city, it's a little restrictive for home builders to try to build in the area. And 11,000 units over the next 8 years is quite a few of those items. It's quite a big goal. So my only comment would be to help loosen any kind of regulation that is preventing or deterring home builders from building in the area. A lot of those homes that I sold years ago, those home buyers were first-time home buyers who have now moved up into existing single-family homes in the area or moved out to the Rancho Mission Viejo, more suburban areas. But I think entry-level small unit housing would help you achieve the lower income rates on that. And the only other question I have would be, has the city partnered with the Building Industry Association to talk about ideas on how to spur development in the Costa Mesa area?
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee. Really appreciate that. So to your first point, actually, I would love, you given your perspective, if you could send an email and just make some suggestions that the city should consider regarding how to accomplish some of the things you mentioned. And second, the city has a number of subject matter expert meetings lined up for later on in the process. We'll be engaging the building community, affordable housing developers, and a number of other folks with specialties in affordable housing development to figure out the best way to develop affordable housing or plan for the future of housing in Costa Mesa. So we do have those lined up, and we are going to be continuing to plan those and push the information out regarding them in the near future.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Jan H.
Hi, my name is Jan Harmon, and can you hear me?
Yes, hi Jan.
Okay, and been a Costa Mesa resident since 1973. Recently in the city, I have seen an enormous amount of building. And it gets to the point where do you put anything else? And I don't like the idea of filling the city so packed with people and traffic. And so do you have any report on what's recently been built in the city? Like along Placentia, there's been a lot of building, high-rise building. And do you have in that report of all the building that's been going on in the last few years, do you have a report on how much of that has been low-income housing?
Yes, so the city actually is required to report to the State Department of Housing and Community Development every year through what's called an annual progress report. So I think exactly what you're talking about, that shows the different income categories of everything that was built within the city, whether it's residential units or accessory dwelling units, and any unit that got built within the city, there is a report. The housing element does look at that, and it looks at past performance during this current cycle, and considering the locations of future housing and just the development potential in Costa Mesa in general. So we do have that report, and we'll be taking a look at it.
Do we get to see that report?
I believe that those are public reports, but I may refer to Jennifer and Manu just to confirm.
Sure. Yes, all annual reports that the city submits to the state are public documents. So I will talk with staff and see if this is something that we could actually post on our website. Those are things that we will summarize in the housing element as well for informational purposes, but we'll work on getting them posted on our website so it's a little bit easier for everyone to see.
Jennifer, just to clarify, we do have the APRs for the current housing element cycle online. It's under our general plan tab on the city website.
Current, but
Great.
not, but how far back does that go?
We have the fifth cycle currently online.
So
And
the
that's
fifth cycle started in 2013, just to
2013 till now.
clarify. Yeah.
And does that include traffic?
That does not, I think the annual progress reports focus mainly on housing, but I know the city does keep other as well, but that report focuses mainly on housing.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, the next speaker will be Robert Moore, or Morse, Robert Morse.
Yes, my question is, does permanent supportive housing count for the low income housing units?
That's a great question, Robert. It really depends on how it's built. There are different types of supportive housing. So housing units have to meet the state's definition of a housing unit, which is defined in the census. So as long as it meets that definition, then yes, it can, and it meets the income category requirements, then yes, it can count for lower, but it really depends on the project and on the specific supportive housing development.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Next one will be, speaker will be Art Goddard.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
I can, thank you.
Good. Good evening. Art Goddard, Costa Mesa resident for 43 years, a stakeholder in the community. And I have two concerns that I'd like to mention and ask some questions about. The first one is the what apparently seems to be an assault on the R1 zone. And I'm referring to recent legislation, the year 2020 in California. Granny units, duplexes, triplexes, street parking. I'm 78 years old, so believe me, I know what it feels like to be a dinosaur. And maybe it's appropriate that I live in dinosaur housing and that R1 is on the way out. I don't know. But looking at the legislation, it appears as though the character of the R1 zone could be changing over the next 8 or 20 years. What is the city staff plan for trying to meet the requirements and the legislation and try to preserve the nature of the R1 zones?
Yeah,
Second concern.
Oh.
Is there a time limit on what I can say here?
No, we generally were giving about 2 minutes, but we keep going.
Okay, so I'll go on.
You have the floor. Yeah.
Thank you. I didn't know if there was a 3-minute limit or something like that. I'd like to direct staff's attention to the large amount of property in Costa Mesa that's under public ownership. And specifically, I'd like to focus on the amount of property in Costa Mesa owned by the state of California. And when I look at the fifth cycle housing element, which is online, it appears as though it was inconvenient and the economy wasn't good. And so the idea of putting 170 low-income housing units on Fairview Development Center was dropped out of the plan. So my question is, there's quite a bit of land there. The hospital operation seems to be minimal. And I'm wondering what the city's plan is. And I understand this goes into politics more than professional staff work. I do understand that. But what is the city's plan for re-engaging the state of California in helping to solve the problem that they just handed us with the 11,733 units in the next 8 years? It seems to me that the city should be working hard to try to re-engage the state of California in being part of the solution. I'd also like to draw your attention to the fairgrounds, the Orange County Fairgrounds. Now I'm going to sound like a crackpot, of course, but there's 125 acres at the Orange County Fairgrounds. It was put for the Orange County Fair in 1949. You may not know, but in 1955, which is only 6 years after it was given over to the 32nd Agricultural District, in 1955, they had a bright idea. Let's put a racetrack here. I'm not talking about the motorcycle racetrack. I'm talking about thoroughbred horse racing. That was the plan in 1955. We'd become Santa Anita South. Fast forward to the late 70s and 80s, let's build an amphitheater there, second in size only to Anaheim Stadium. And that did cause a little upheaval in the community. The city went to court to say, gee, state of California, you need to run your plans through our planning department and get our approval. And the court said, no, they don't. So then more recently, the fairgrounds was talking about being sold when the state was in economic trouble. So my point is simple, 125 acres. Maybe it's time for the city of Costa Mesa to work to move the Orange County Fair up to the Great Park, which is a lot more space, and to see that this property is sold into private ownership for the development of low-cost housing and housing of all sorts to help meet our 11,733 units.
Yeah, thank you, Art.
Thank you very much. That's the end of my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will. I'll try and get a few answers to those as well. So at this point, we were so early on that no site is off the table. I will say sites that are not owned by the city, and specifically sites that are owned by the state, are difficult, and they do take conversations like you're talking about. So at this point, no site is off the table. The city will be reviewing every site within the city boundaries and have those discussions as we continue to go throughout the process. To your first point, the city is required to, any legislation that gets passed that the city needs to implement, they are required to go ahead and do that. So I don't know if pass it off to maybe Manu or Jennifer if they want to add anything to that. But at this point, I mean, anything that comes along regarding single family zoning, the city will look at what the state is doing and obviously have a discussion.
Yeah, just to add to that, Nick, from staff's perspective, obviously, in order to meet these RHNA numbers, the city is really going to look into some creative solutions for how to accomplish that while also maintaining the fabric of the Costa Mesa community. And that's always the trick when we're talking about development of any sort. But it is one of the city's top priorities to continue, one, to provide a range of housing opportunities for Costa Mesa residents, but also to maintain that neighborhood compatibility. So as Nick said, we'll be looking into over the next 9 months, and that's what this process is really about, to have these types of conversations and to make sure that we're making the best decisions possible. So I appreciate your feedback and your input, and please do make sure if you're on this call that you sign up for our notification list so we can continue to have these conversations. Thank you.
All right, the next speaker will be Kathy Esfahani.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity to participate. I am a long-term resident of Costa Mesa, essentially spent my whole life here. And I want my children to be able to live here, and am real concerned about the high cost of housing and the lack of affordable housing, so that all segments of the community can belong here, can find a home. So I'd like to see the city make real efforts to encourage the development of affordable housing in Costa Mesa. And I have a couple ideas of things I would like to see the city do. I hope the city will adopt an inclusionary ordinance so that developers will include affordable housing in other, in market rate projects, because that would have helped so much if in the last city administration, when all of that new housing went in. If we'd had an inclusionary ordinance, we would currently have affordable housing. But of course, we didn't have an ordinance and nothing got built. So the other thing I'd say, I really appreciated Mr. Goddard's comments about Fairview Developmental Center. I think that is a key property in the city. I know it's state owned, but I think that the city can partner with the state in getting affordable housing built there. It will be very important for our city leaders and for city council to communicate to the governor that that's what we want to see there. There's so much promise. There's so much land there, and there are lots of advantages to the location. It's on Harbor Boulevard, so there are bus lines. I know an earlier speaker talked about her concern about increased traffic with housing coming in. But, if we took a creative approach and had housing that had lots of mixed uses, so that there was rental housing for families who desperately need it, lower income families. And we also had some single family homes, and we had retail and restaurants and bike paths and walkability, so that people wouldn't really have to get in their cars to do things. And we could have park areas there and recreation, and then maybe trolleys along Harbor and along the main arteries in the city, so that people didn't have to get into their cars to go the places they need to go. I guess I just would like to see the city come up with some plans that will help us use that space in a way to solve our housing needs, but also to give Costa Mesa something that we could be really proud of in terms of a real forward-thinking development that's not car-centric, and that is, especially since we need parks and open space, we could have housing around a park that the rest of the community could ride bikes to and enjoy. So the last thing I'd say is that someone was asking a question about permanent supportive housing. And I think Costa Mesa needs to do its part and have a permanent supportive housing here. We are doing wonderful services in getting people off the street who are without homes, but we don't have a permanent supportive housing facility here where people can live. We get people placed in other cities, but we can make room for them in our city as well. I think everybody belongs here. So anyway, thank you so much. Those are my ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. Those were really great ideas. As you can see, Jennifer and me are writing furiously, so we are definitely taking notes, and I really appreciate those ideas. As we mentioned earlier, nothing is off the table. We'll have to be creative in order to meet our needs. So really appreciate those comments.
All right, the next speaker will be Costa Mesa Opportunity Zone.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to see if the stakeholders that are interested in participating in the planning process on these subject matter specialty meetings, if we can volunteer and not have our interests be rejected. We have, for example, we have asked to serve on the BAC and it has not been responded to. I just want to know if the subject matter specialty meetings will be open to anyone to participate, or is it going to be that you're just going to pick who you want to hear from? That's my first question.
So we have not determined the makeup of those, but if you're interested in joining, please send an email. There'll be an email address right after this slide, and please send an email that and indicate your interest.
Okay, and then the second couple of things I'd like to comment. I'll try to stay within a few minutes here. But if you go to, if anybody from the public is interested, if you go to cdfifund.gov and put in 92627, our zip code, you're going to see all the programs that we qualify for. Just in 2020, we've now got a number of census tracts that now qualify under the BEA partially qualified tracts, also under new markets tax credits, under, we've now been designated as of 2020 under economic distressed communities. What this means is that we now qualify for programs that historically we never qualified for. This is private capital money, government grants. Obviously, we have the opportunity zone. And what I'd like to see is that the housing element help us with transparency to the developer community and the investment community, that we have incentives to help us with both housing and economic development. And we should have a comprehensive plan as soon as possible that includes the stakeholders like ourselves that want to be a part of our future in Costa Mesa. We operate a 100-year-old boatyard. We want to be a part of the legacy of our community for another 100 years. We want to have a say about what that looks like. And we would like the city, when they especially own control of a property, meaning they've got control of a site, that they put the incentives out there. It's right now, it's all behind closed doors. There's documents that say that there's incentives for developers, but why aren't we publishing those as part of a comprehensive plan? Just like these properties that you'll see, or these areas that qualify for opportunity zone, qualify for new market tax credits, low income housing tax credits. All of this should be on our website so that the public, developers, and incentives or investors can bring their money into our community to help build our community, both with workforce housing, low to moderate income housing, and home ownership for residents that are already here. There's so many programs available, and yet none of it is on our city's website. There is no plan. We're in a SEDS plan with a regional economic development with the county for the Economic Development Administration. And it's been, the government's been asking us to update this because we have an opportunity zone, and this document is sitting here waiting. And yet in a post-COVID world, we have entrepreneurs and people that have lost their jobs. I don't know when the city will decide that it's urgent to update the SEDS and to make our plans for economic and housing public. And when the city owns property, like for example, the senior center, and they want to see a 60-unit senior housing project go in, but they didn't put an RFP together, they literally handed it to a developer, Jamboree, whose last comment when they received it was, I'll now have to figure out how to pay for it. Well, guess what? It was in an opportunity zone, but they're not allowed to use the fund when they already have control of the site. They have to first create the fund and then get control of the site. So they won't receive the benefit that's available to them because our city isn't allowing, number one, they haven't allowed certain people to participate and help the city. There's block grants available that will help for technical assistance. We do not have a certified economic development director on staff. We do not have a certified housing development director on staff, and therefore we're missing opportunity. And that's why we're advocating for a seat at the table. If there's going to be specialty meetings, we want to have a seat at the table because we care about our city, and we don't want to have opportunities go by another year and have staff say that they don't believe in stakeholder meetings because they're a waste of time. that came directly from Andrea Marr, that stakeholder meetings are a waste of time. And in our opinion, maybe they are, but they shouldn't be. And we don't intend to waste anybody's time. We want to help our city, and we do not want to be shut out. We want to have a say at it. So my name is Susan Iwamoto. We own the Boatyard at 141 East 16th Street. We care about our city. We want to see incentives be transparent. We want projects going out to bid through an RFP process. We want incentives published, not behind closed doors. And we want all of the programs that are available to us: low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits, opportunity zone funds. We want all of it made available on our city's website so that everyone can see what is available. And thank you for hearing my comments.
Thank you, Susan. We appreciate your comments, and we will definitely be discussing those. Thank you for them.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Garrett Whitfield.
Hi, Garrett. Yeah, you may be muted if you're trying to speak.
How about now?
Got you now. Perfect.
Okay, great. So just a couple of quick questions. The first question is for the unit count that was set by the state. I think it was like the 11,700 units. Has the city of Costa Mesa asked for a reprieve or a request for reduction on that number of units, just based on, I guess, demographic data, or basically saying that that projection for number of units is excessive based on current rates of residents and current, I guess, diagnostics for the city? And the second question I have is, we have 60%, or based on the numbers that I think I saw, they're looking for 60% to be affordable housing. So we have all-time high land costs right now, all-time high construction costs. We have new environmental design requirements and regulations that were set by the state. It's called Title 24, that is going into effect or has already gone into effect. And we have all-time high material costs. So my question is if we're trying to achieve 60% affordable housing, how is anybody from a developer standpoint going to be able to build that? Is there going to be developer incentives that are going to be funded by the city? Is there city funding available that's going to be put forth to developing all this affordable housing? Because I think if it's left up to just capital markets, I don't believe that people are going to be very incentivized to provide affordable housing in a community if they can't make any money off of the potential development. But that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, great. Garrett, you make a lot of really great points. And that's one of the difficult things when you have an area that has high land costs, developing affordable housing, it is difficult to make it pencil. So that's what the housing element is really going to explore. And those are some of the ideas that we need, we as a city need to hear in terms of what will help to get affordable housing built. It's such a big emphasis for the state that we need to work those out in different programs and potential policies. But first things first, we need to hear from the community because it's not just our team planning. It really is the whole community. So all ideas in terms of developers having expertise in these areas is really helpful to the whole planning process. And to your earlier point, I don't believe that the city has asked for any kind of reprieve from HCD or from SCAG on the number of units.
Yeah, so thank you, Nick. Just to add to that, in terms of communications with HCD and a waiver or something, that's not something that's out there. But Minu, do you want to talk a bit about the appeal?
Sure. My name is Minu Ashabi. I'm a principal planner on staff. The city has been involved with SCAG, which is the Southern California Association of Governments, who is the entity that distributes the RHNA number once HCD has that determination. We were involved from the beginning when they started doing the methodology, submitted a number of letters questioning the methodology that was being adopted. SCAG adopted the methodology in September, and the city has submitted a RHNA appeal letter request to SCAG. They have about 45 days to review the appeal. There are a number of cities in Orange County as well as Southern California that have requested an appeal. So I'm assuming that's going to take a little bit longer, but it's the timing is going to be sometime in February, I believe, for the appeal hearings. So the final RHNA determination is following the appeal process.
That's a great point. Thank you, Minya.
Thank you. The next speaker is call-in user 1. Call-in user 1. If you press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hi. Okay, this is Yvonne. I'm a longtime resident of Costa Mesa, homeowner. And part of my question she just addressed about the appeal. And I wanted to know whether or not the city has a contingency plan in the event the appeal is not approved, because from what I read, you had already had conversations or concerns about what they had indicated we would be responsible for in terms of housing. Yet and still, they still gave us that 11,000 some odd number in housing. So my question is, one, is there a contingency plan for in the event the appeal is not approved? My second question is, you've indicated that you're asking for a reduction in the housing from the 11,733 to 5,867. Any plans on where that housing will be here in the city? And then I have one more question. Let's see. Could you talk about whether or not the city has any programs that would be available to assist residents in being able to afford to live in Costa Mesa, or even for partnerships? Thank you.
Thank you. I will, in just a second, I will pass it off to Minu to maybe talk about the appeal just a little bit more if she wants to expand on her previous comments. But on your second comment of the land available to or identified to accommodate these units, whether the need is 5,000 or it's 11,000 or whatever it ends up being, the city will have to conduct a sites analysis for all parcels within the city to identify the best places to potentially accommodate future housing. And a lot of this process is a very open community process, like the survey indicates. That the third slide on the survey is all about potential areas for future housing. So we are looking forward to receiving feedback and input on that survey regarding those potential areas and where the community sees fit. We've already heard a couple of those on this call. So we are going to be shortly diving into the sites analysis to start taking a look at where those units may go.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Ian Stevenson. Ian Stevenson.
Ian, you may be muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, this has been a great call. I really appreciate all the information, and many of the comments have just been so great. I just have a couple questions. My understanding is that since 2013, there's been 0 units of very low income housing built in the city and almost 900 units of above moderate income housing. So that's a pretty unbalanced approach. And I know in previous housing elements, there has been, you know, requirements for some lower income housing, but yet it hasn't been produced. So my question is, as this housing element gets put together and walked out, how does it stay in place that we actually get the varying levels of affordability and so forth put into it, and they actually they're actionable? Because, you know, I really feel like, you know, I've lived in the city for 36 years and raised my kids here. And my kids can't afford to live here. And I see a lot of our working force people who they can't live here. So we really need to create inclusive, equitable workforce housing that will help create a balanced social fabric for our city and our city's economy. So I hope that as we go through this process and we come up with plans and numbers, that they actually become actionable, not just ideas. So that's really my question is, once this plan's put together, how do we ensure that there is these different levels of affordability put in place?
Yeah, thank you, Ian. I wish I had an easy answer for you on that one, but unfortunately I don't. That is the crux of the housing element. It's how do we get this development built? It's always been the requirement of the housing element that we plan to accommodate for these units and accommodate the ability for them to get built. With this 6th cycle, there is some more teeth behind some state legislation to really focus on getting housing built through a number of different methods. So that's what we're going to be exploring. I don't have an answer for you, right now, but as we continue throughout the process, we're going to be working through those programs and policies to look at what's going to be most effective to, like you said, be actionable and really look to get affordable housing built within Costa Mesa.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Jeff Pettis.
Hey guys, thank you for letting me ask a question here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, Jeff.
Great. So I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Goddard's comment, and he covered off on everything I'd like to say. But one thing I feel remiss if I didn't. I ran for city council this cycle and did not win, but I promised and made a huge commitment to all my constituency that I'd stay involved. And I just wanted to say that I'd say in the top 2 for sure pieces of feedback I got when I was walking the neighborhoods, when I was doing my meet and greets, when I was online, was the R1, R2 folks worried about infringement on their private property rights. So I know it's been discussed a lot, but I'm speaking for, a couple of thousand people that voted. So I just wanted their voice to be known that that's a big concern, and I'm not going to belabor the point too much. And so I thought I would just point that out for District 6, I should say. And I'm speaking for District 6 here, which I happen to live in. And also on the RHNA, since Mr. Whitfield touched on it somewhat, I know that there are appeals out there for the big number. And also, is it, the other cities, Newport, I'm sure, Irvine, Newport, Santa Ana, the surrounding cities, is there such a thing as collaborating with other cities on an appeal effort, or is it just an individual city thing? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Really appreciate your comments. Currently, the appeals are just jurisdiction-based, or just jurisdiction by jurisdiction, whoever decided to file the appeal through the formal process. So currently, that's the way that the process is going to work until, as you mentioned, I think about February, when the appeal decisions are heard. And then decisions will be made by SCAG in coordination. So currently, that's how the process is working. I don't believe there's any other larger effort to tackle the RHNA need. But if there is, obviously the city will, as applicable, make everybody aware and provide that information.
The next speaker will be Linda. Linda, if you can unmute yourself, please, and then you can speak.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Linda, and I participated in the city's 4th and 5th housing element cycle, and I just wanted to continue my participation in this housing element cycle. I had one question, which is basically, will the city work with the public to incorporate comments during the drafting of the housing element versus the city drafting the housing element and then presenting it to the public for comments? I also wanted to echo and voice my support for Kathy Espahani's and Ian Stevenson's comments. I don't want to repeat what they said because it was everything I wanted to say, but they said it so articulately and perfectly that I just wanted to add on 2 additional recommendations. I basically just for the city to consider co-locating affordable housing with childcare centers. As a mother of a 2-year-old child, I'm sure you probably just heard her. I know how difficult it is to balance work and being a parent full time. Pre-COVID, this was a balancing act that was already super difficult. And now in the era of COVID, I just can't tell you how many conversations I've had with my friends with young children. And I'm sure many of you have had the same conversation of what the struggle has been. But I'm so sure that this situation is even worse for families who live paycheck to paycheck who are barely able to pay their rents and can't afford the exorbitant cost of childcare. I think it would be just so helpful to be able to build affordable homes that co-locate with a childcare center for working families to help alleviate these issues. Another recommendation I had for the city is to create programs and policies that would strengthen the protections of mobile home owners and long-term motel residents from future potential displacement. I really look forward to having a more in-depth discussion with all of you on developing additional effective housing strategies that will help create new housing opportunities for Costa Mesans who live and work in the city. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Linda. We appreciate you being involved in the 4th and 5th cycle. That's really impressive. So appreciate you being involved in the 6th as well. As we showed, we're going to have a number of outreach opportunities, both at the district level and specific targeted focused outreach meetings as well. So we definitely will have all of those meetings before any draft is prepared. And then once a draft is prepared, we're going to have another set of meetings to review that with the community to make sure we walk through. And it's a very open and engaging process as we go. So we definitely, that is what the city will do.
Thank you. The next speaker is Christine Knoll.
Hi, thank you for hearing my comments and for putting this together. It's really fantastic to hear so many insights and thoughts about how we do this well. I also want to echo some of the comments regarding the Fairview development site as a potential location and just any efforts that we can make to work with the state on that. I think it is a really good opportunity. And a few people have mentioned the need for, incentives. And I think some of the policy that would be required I would also advocate for an inclusionary ordinance that would provide opportunities for developers and move them toward being able to, or toward the city's goals of being able to reach these RHNA numbers. I would just share too that I work as a pastor here in the city, and we have a lot of people in our congregation who are in helping professions like social work and teaching, and are just starting out in their career. And it is a constant thing about finding a place to live and finding a place that's affordable with their income. And so I think this is really timely and important for our community. And I would also highlight the need for a low-income family housing. One question I put in the question and answer, it doesn't look like anyone was able to get to it, was just, you had listed the income level numbers, and I splitting up the 11,000 something by the low income, very low, moderate. And I'm just wondering if those numbers are set or if that's something that could also be modified in this process, because it would be great to be able to have some family housing, as much family housing for low and extremely low, I think, for working families. So thanks for my comments.
No, thank you, Christine. To answer your question, those numbers are set by SCAG as they're allocated. As Minu mentioned, as the appeal process goes through, they're subject to potentially change, subject to that. But those allocations into the different income categories are set by SCAG.
All right, the next speaker will be Mildred Perez.
Hi, able to hear me?
Yes.
All right. My name is Mildred Perez. I'm with the Kennedy Commission, a community-based organization that advocates for the production of homes affordable for low-income families in Orange County. And I just wanted to know what policies will be enforced by the city to ensure developer responsibility and balanced production of affordable housing in the next planning period. And I'd definitely like to see an inclusionary housing policy and housing affordable at all income levels.
Yeah, thank you. So your point is well taken on the inclusionary. And in terms of the policies that will be put in place, it's really too early to say which policies are going to be put in place. Those need to be vetted as we go through the housing element update process, and we go through this community engagement process to engage not only residents, business owners, stakeholders, subject matter experts. Everybody will be involved in the crafting of those policies. So just unfortunately right now, the first meeting, we're not able to list specific policies, but as the public review draft comes out, we'll have more of an idea of how that looks, with the ability to still then make revisions and things like that.
The next speaker is Allison Burchett.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys, and thanks for prior comments. Very interesting dialogue. I want to mention, I just moved here from Los Angeles, specifically for all the reasons that California and Orange County is not Los Angeles. So you can imagine I have a little bit of PTSD when I hear about some massive changes around, a massive influx of new housing units. It kind of makes me start to wonder, is this going to start to become what I just worked really hard to leave? So that's my first point. I echo those comments of Mr. Goddard and Mr. Pettis and appreciate that. I live in the East Side. I think several people have brought that up, but I don't know if anybody ever really answered it. I'm starting to see some, and I haven't been tracking at the state level, but some of the erosions of the R1 zone. Can you elaborate on what is going on with the R1 zones? I'm noticing in my area some what might be called granny apartments in what is traditionally an R1. Does R1 even exist anymore, or should we just kiss that goodbye? That's my first question, then I have a few others.
Yeah, no worries. I actually will, specifically to speak to R1, I may ask Manu or Jennifer to jump in and speak to R1. I could maybe touch base on some of the state legislation, but Manu looks like she's unmuted, so I'll pass to her.
R1 zoning still stands. There has been no changes to that, but during the 2019 legislation, there were a number of laws passed that allowed construction of accessory dwelling units, what we used to refer to as granny units, and also a junior accessory dwelling unit. And so those types of units are now permitted in the R1 zone, and that's the change that you may have been seeing in the community. So the city tried to regulate some of the issues that has to do with maintaining open space or requiring parking spaces. That was as of the last cycle, which was back in 2018. But with the new changes to the state law, those development standards were preempted. So we no longer can request specific lot size or certain size of lot that could have an accessory dwelling unit or open space requirements. So all of those requirements were preempted. And that may be why you're seeing an increase in the number of ADUs in the neighborhood.
Got it.
Yeah, I would just add that those laws are statewide laws, so every community is dealing with how to address those and how to address them in a way that maintains the community and community expectations. So the city is developing an accessory dwelling unit ordinance even now, and it went to Planning Commission for a recommendation and is expected to be scheduled for a city council hearing in the next month or so. So if that's something that you're interested in, please do email me new, and we'll be sure that you're on the email notification list when that comes forward.
Okay, got it. Great. And thank you guys for pushing back on the RHNA numbers. like, I encourage you to really stick to it and push back as much as possible. I mean, I'm surprised that sustainability hasn't been brought up at all. You know, not only there's a myriad of reasons why kind of overpopulating a concentrated area already can lead to a bunch of negative effects, but obviously sustainability and our resources here locally being absolutely stretched to the maximum as is, let alone, you know, with a huge influx of new units. I certainly think that that represents an issue. So I encourage you to be strong in your pushback, and you have our support. Not an expert in this field by any stretch, so I don't have a lot of specific recommendations, except I just wanted to be a voice for, you know, single family home owner, work really, really hard to get here into kind of the dream, right? And I am concerned about having multi-units, you know, on my street, lowering the value and overcrowding the streets and overcrowding schools and a bunch of other things. So just wanted to voice that opinion, and hopefully you take that into consideration, particularly when forming your kind of subject matter expert panel. I think that it would be good to not just have developers and all these people talking about like, okay, how high are we going to build it and what color, to have residents who might actually be in somewhat opposition to this to counterbalance those voices. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Allison. I appreciate it. And so in addition to the speaker, one of the speakers here, I'm also the timekeeper. We are coming up on 7:15. I know we have a few more comments, and I really do urge anybody who still has their hand up to continue this conversation, to participate in the district-specific meetings. I think we have time to take one more comment, but I did want to just flash forward a couple slides to those who are able to still stick on and see and show that this is the email address that please email, as we've been mentioning, if you have any other further questions. Anything that goes there, we will be taking into account. We also got, I believe, 16 Q&A questions, question and answer questions into the log. The city will be putting together, along with questions received in the next workshop, a list and post on the city's website of responses to those questions. So if you ask the question, it will get answered in the Q&A. And so I also wanted to point out one more time the city's website. Please go there, review the information that's available, review the contact information. Please take the survey and go ahead and respond to that. With that, I believe we don't have time, unfortunately, to take any more verbal questions, but if you have some, feel free to reach out to the project team either via email, and we'll be able to answer those questions as well. I wanted to pass back to Jennifer just to kind of close out.
All right, thank you so much. I just wanted to thank everyone on the call for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us and talk about this important project and this important planning effort for the Costa Mesa community. As Nick said, we're really looking here to engage with our community members and our neighbors and our colleagues, and to find out more about ideas that you have to share and concerns that you have to share, so that we can consider those as we take our next steps and move forward with some of our planning efforts. So please note the email address here on the slide, and please email us your contact information, and we'll be sure to add you to a notification list, so that as we plan more of these community meetings and opportunities to have these conversations, you get those notifications. And then, of course, we'll be updating our website very often as information is developed, and pushing more information onto that website as well. So for those that we didn't have time to take your questions, please email them to the Housing Element email address, and we will respond via email and also post responses online. So I just wanted to thank you all for coming, and we will be in touch and pushing out information about our next town hall meeting very shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll add, if you'd like to attend the Spanish speaking presentation, it starts in just a few minutes. So the information's on the city's website. Please continue the conversation there as well. Thank you, everyone.